Today we're talking about a musician whose life was basically a revolutionary anthem, a man whose death pushed an entire nation to the edge. This is the story of Hachalu Hundessa, and this is the song that, well, it refuses to end.
So let's set the scene. It's the evening of June 29th, 2020 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. A series of gunshots rings out, and a 34-year-old artist is murdered. But you gotta understand, this wasn't just any artist, and this was no ordinary crime. This was the moment that lit the fuse.
And the fallout? Well, it was immediate and devastating. In the days that followed, grief and rage just exploded across the country. And in that chaos, at least 166 people lost their lives. That number, it's the heartbreaking, immediate cost of that one single act.
The government's reaction was intense. To try and get a lid on the uprising, they just shut down the internet, plunged millions of people into total silence. It was this desperate move to try and muffle a roar that was just getting louder and louder.
And all this, it brings us to the big question, right? How on earth could the murder of one musician trigger a national crisis this massive, this violent? To get the answer, we have to go back, way back.
Yeah, to understand the icon, you really have to understand the kid he once was. So let's go to the highlands of Mboa, where a young shepherd boy was literally finding his voice out in the fields. Hachalu Hundessa came from pretty humble beginnings. Born in '86, one of 8 kids. And while his dad had these big dreams of him becoming a doctor, it was his mom who really encouraged his true passion. He once said, "I used to sing whatever came to my head," which is just perfect because it shows how his music was born right there, from the land and its people.
Now, this is really important context. His home, Ambo, was in Oromia, the heartland of Ethiopia's largest ethnic group, the Oromo. But here's the thing, they're what's called a marginalized majority. For generations, even though they were the biggest group, their language and culture were suppressed. This is the world Hachalu was born into.
So, as a teenager, Hachalu got involved in the movement for Oromo rights. And that activism, well, it came with a heavy, heavy price. It led to what was probably the single most important turning point of his life. But this wasn't a setback. No way. This was the crucible that would forge him into the man he became.
Just try to imagine that. You're 17, you're still in high school, and you're arrested for your political beliefs. Then you spend the next 5 years of your life locked away without ever even getting a proper trial.
But his father, Hundessa, he saw things differently. When he visited his son, he told him, "Prison makes a man stronger." And you know what? In Hachalu's case, he was absolutely right.
Hachalu basically turned his prison cell into a university. He read everything he could on Ethiopian history, really picking apart the official stories that had tried to erase his people. And get this, with no pen, no paper, no instruments, he composed 9 entire songs, completely in his head. He was building his identity brick by brick, artist and revolutionary.
The moment he was released, he recorded those songs. And his debut album, Race of the King, it wasn't just music. It was a cultural bomb. It was a direct challenge to the official history books, a powerful, lyrical correction of the past.
So what was the secret sauce? How did his music become so incredibly powerful? Well, the answer lies in this amazing, traditional Ethiopian poetic trick, something he mastered like almost no one else.
It's called wax and gold. Okay, think of it like this. The wax is the pretty, simple meaning you get on the surface. It's what you hear first. But the gold, that's the good stuff. That's the hidden layer, the deeper and often really political truth hiding underneath.
His most famous song, Malanjira, is the perfect example. The wax, the surface, it's a beautiful, sad song about love and a lost piece of land. But the gold was a blistering takedown of a government plan to expand the capital city by taking over Oromo farmland.
And those lyrics, they became the anthem, the rallying cry for the huge Oromo protests that exploded from 2014 to 2016. I mean, he distilled generations of pain into a 4-minute song that could move an entire people to action.
And that's not all. He was also the undisputed master of Gerasa, a traditional Oromo style of music that's used to praise heroes and get warriors fired up for battle. He took this ancient art form and just supercharged it for the 21st century. His concerts weren't just shows. They were these electric moments of collective pride and pure defiance.
And all this cultural power started to lead to a really stunning political moment. In late 2017, Hachalu held this massive concert in Addis Ababa. People who were there said he walked the stage like a lion, and in the audience was this rising politician named Abiy Ahmed. Just 4 months later, Abiy, and Oromo himself, becomes prime minister. It was historic, a shift that many say his music helped make possible.
But this story doesn't end there with a political victory. It ends in tragedy. And this is where his life and his death become part of a much bigger global story, placing him in a long line of artists who are silenced for telling the truth.
I mean, when you look at his story, the parallels are just so powerful. You could say he's Ethiopia's Victor Hara, the Chilean folk singer murdered for his protest songs. He echoes Bob Marley, who survived an assassination attempt because his reggae music was seen as too revolutionary. For these artists, music wasn't just entertainment, it was a weapon.
And what's really haunting is that Hachalu, he knew the danger he was in. Just a few days before he was killed, he told a journalist this: he wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of a meaningless death. He knew he was a target. He knew he walked alongside death every single day.
And then his worst fears came true. His murder happens, and the country just erupts. We see the protests again, the deaths, the internet blackout. But then something truly amazing happens. On the other side of the world, in London, Oromo protesters pulled down a statue of an old Ethiopian emperor, directly linking Hachalu's death to this long, long history of oppression.
A year after his murder, his final album came out, and the title asks the simple but just gut-wrenching question, Mom Melissa. It translates to, what remains or what's left?
And the answer, it seems, is everything. What remains is not silence. It's the opposite of silence. What remains is the sound of a nation that, through his art, finally, truly found its voice. Hachalu Hundessa might be gone, but his song, that defiant, powerful song, it refuses to end.
Today we're talking about a musician whose life was basically a revolutionary anthem, a man whose death pushed an entire nation to the edge. This is the story of Hachalu Hundessa, and this is the song that, well, it refuses to end. So let's set the scene. It's the evening of June 29th, 2020, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. A series of gunshots rings out, and a 34-year-old artist is murdered. But you gotta understand, this wasn't just any artist, and this was no ordinary crime. This was the moment that lit the fuse.
And the fallout? Well, it was immediate and devastating. In the days that followed, grief and rage just exploded across the country. And in that chaos, at least 166 people lost their lives. That number, it's the heartbreaking, immediate cost of that one single act.
The government's reaction was intense. To try and get a lid on the uprising, they just shut down the internet, plunged millions of people into total silence. It was this desperate move to try and muffle a roar that was just getting louder and louder. And all this